Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have two card spotlights that we're covering. The first one was Sentry. That video is already uploaded, it's already live. If you missed that one, I'll leave a link in the description below. This one is going to be over the second card that was released today in Darkhawk. And Darkhawk is a 4-cost, 1-power card that has the ongoing ability plus 2 power for each card in your opponent's deck. So this is like a alternative take on a Ronin where you get power for each card in your opponent's hand, but now we can get additional power for each card in the opponent's deck. And so this could exceed the 7-card limit that Ronin had, and we could find ourselves with even more upside. Now, out of the 2 cards that are being released today, this is the one that I expect to make the most impact on the meta. I think Sentry will see some play, but if it came down to picking one or the other, I think Darkhawk is where I see the most potential. And so today I'm going to be breaking down my top 3 deck recommendations. I brewed and theory crafted 3 different decks to try out with Darkhawk to try to get the most upside out of his ability and out of his gameplay. And the first one I have is a deck that I call Rockhawk. And this one does kind of what the name says, and it wants to send the opponent as many rocks as possible so that they have as big of a deck left at the end of the game so that you can get the most use out of your Darkhawk and maybe even your Mystique if you copy Darkhawk's ongoing ability. And so we're going to be able to do this in a couple of ways. There are a few play paths that we have. We have the Korg into Rock Slide into a potential Odin play on the last turn, and we would want to stack our Korg and our Rock Slide so that we can re-trigger Odin and push 3 additional cards into their deck at the end of the game. Once we have our Darkhawk on the board, and maybe we've already copied Mystique as well, we can just infuse 6 additional power into both of those cards. Now, if we don't have that play path, Korg is going to be always our priority turn 1 drop if we have him. And then our next play line is kind of going back to a deck that I built way back in the beta, where it focuses around Black Widow and utilizing Black Widow with Wave and Arnim Zola to be able to restrict the opponent from drawing cards. You can do a Black Widow on 2, you can then do Wave on 3. That will allow you to do either an Odin or an Arnim Zola on 4. Or if you have Sarah, you can do Sarah on 4. That will allow you to do your Odin or Arnim Zola on 5, followed by the other one on 6. And so this can be used to either wave lock the opponent so they can only drop 1 card per turn pretty much the entire game, and you can re-trigger your Black Widow several times over. If you happen to have a Wong on the board, then you play your Black Widow. That'll give them 2 Widow's Bites. It, of course, is going to start clogging their board a little bit. If you use Black Widow and then wave into an Odin play, on that turn that you drop the Odin, they're going to have a Widow's Bite plus wave, so they're going to have to make the decision of if they want to drop that Widow's Bite for 4 energy, or if they want to use a regular card for 4 energy and not draw on that following turn. And if they decide to not draw on that following turn, that is going to make your in-game Darkhawk stronger. And so there's going to be some kind of cool, potentially clunky playlines with this. It's going to be a relatively low power push overall, but you're going to restrict the opponent from drawing many of their resources. So if they don't start with them in their hand or draw them on the first couple of turns, then they're not going to have many opportunities to get them. And then if you don't draw into that Black Widow wave playline, you can go the Korg into Wong, into Rock Slide. And then if you happen to have your Korg, Wong, Rock Slide in the same lane and then re-trigger it with your Odin, that is going to be an insane amount of rocks that you're throwing onto the board. And to enable that playline, we have the Psylocke so that we can ramp into one of the turn 4 drops a turn earlier. So we could do Wong on 3, into a Rock Slide on 4, into a Darkhawk on 5, and then an Odin to re-trigger your Rock Slide on 6. And that's going to be a pretty decent power push in the long lane, plus your Darkhawk is going to be very big because of all the rocks that you're infusing into the opponent's deck. This one I think could use some refinement, but I also am very excited to try this one out. But I do think there is going to be a better shell for Darkhawk. The next deck that I have is a Darkhawk negative deck list. Now, this may look very similar to the negative serotonin that we saw several months ago, and that's because it is an exact replica. And we took out one of the mid-range cards, and we're going to add in Nighthawk. Nighthawk, if he gets inverted, is a 1-cost 4-power card that now has the ongoing ability of plus 2 power for each card in your opponent's deck. Even though this list is not going to focus on making sure the opponent has a lot of cards in their deck, at 1 cost, 4 power, he fits the negative serotonin kind of feel very well. And then if they end up having 4 cards left in their deck, that's a 1 cost 12 power play that you have on the board. Now, of course, this gets less impactful if you play a Magic or if they have a Jubilee or other things that are thinning their deck out. But for the most part, it's going to be at least a 1 cost 6 power or a 4 cost 6 to 8 power, which becomes an okay drop even if it's not inverted, which that is what you want from your negative serotonin lists, is a strong card whether it gets inverted or not. You want something that gets some upside if you do draw into the high roll of Mr. Negative, but something that is still playable if you don't. And so I think there's going to be some potential with this deck list. I don't know how consistent it's going to be since a lot of the negative serotonin cards did get nerfed. We had Angela that used to be a higher base power. We have Bishop that also used to be a higher base power. We had Mr. Negative that used to be 5 additional power compared to what he is now. We have Magic that used to be very flexible and could be dropped on turn 5 or turn 6, giving you a lot of flexibility in doing your Sarah into a Magic plus an additional card, and then having a huge turn 7 play. This one's not going to be as flexible, but I do think it will see some merit, and I think it's going to be a decent shell for Darkhawk. And then the last deck that I have that I'm going to try out for today, and I don't know how strong or how consistent it's going to be, is a bounce deck list. And so similar to the first build where we want to send as many rocks into the opponent's deck as possible, this one is going to look at bouncing our Korg a couple of times, which will send them 3 additional cards. And if they had 3 cards at the end of the game normally, and so our Nighthawk is going to be 13 power, which for just having dropped Korg a couple of times, and maybe I'm thinking too much into the Darkhawk build. Maybe you just need Korg and Rock Slide and you don't need something to re-enable it over and over and over again. Maybe just having those 2 base cards as kind of disruption factors in a solid value list will be ultimately where he finds his home. But I think if you're trying to build directly around Darkhawk and you want to get as much value out of him as possible, having something where you can trigger those rocks or those things that you're sending to the opponent's deck multiple times is going to give you a lot of value. And so with this list, it's a standard bounce deck list. You might try to fit in a Black Widow somewhere. There might be some refinement. I did want to leave Chavez in this list to draw into our bounce components a little bit more consistently, but it may be that the collector ends up being too low power and we cut the collector for a Black Widow. If we use Black Widow into a beast into Black Widow again, that's going to essentially give 2 additional cards that are going to be in the opponent's deck at the end of the game because they had 2 Widow's Bites that forced them into not being able to draw those cards on those 2 turns. And so I think there will be a decent power push with this deck, and Darkhawk is going to be another big power push for us. And so the big power pushes in this deck are going to be our Angela, our Bishop, sometimes our Collector. If he doesn't make the cut, we can cut him and we would have our 3rd power push in Darkhawk instead for a last turn, late game, just massive power swing that we can throw into the board and direct it in the most optimized and efficient place possible. And so I think Darkhawk is going to see a lot more play than a Sentry, but I am excited to pull both, and I am going to try to unlock both as soon as it comes out so that I can get gameplay and gameplay footage around both cards. If you have other ideas, if you've seen something in the game that used Darkhawk well, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm always interested in seeing how different people kind of adapt these builds or what builds are working maybe better than what I anticipated. But I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.